Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, we've already lost Shelly. It's all good.
As always, got the giggles already. What's going on over there?
As always, I am Blake Smith. And with me are my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelly Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. How are y'all doing?
I'm good. I don't know about Shelly though.
I don't know what's up with
I'll be
Shelly
on
already.
the comments as soon as I can get it to pull up. Sorry. Me and technology, I suck at this. Why do y'all ever have me do anything? I'm terrible at this crap. I'm like, where's our feed? Where's our stream?
No.
I don't have any idea.
She'll get there eventually. It's all good. That's why she just
Hi to everyone until I can say it on the comments.
There we go.
Y'all
Yeah,
be kind to me and shut your mouth already.
She's like Zoolander slapping the computer over there trying to get it to work.
Yeah, we've already been a little giggle fest on the pre-broadcast, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, we had a wonderful talk about the dating world. But anyways, enough about that. No, tonight we were smack dab in the middle of spooky season, so we are going to be bringing to y'all a haunting tale that I'm pretty sure we all know about. I think we've all heard something, watched a movie, seen something on this character. Is the character of the Headless Horseman. So what do y'all know about said Mr. Headless Horseman?
The Wonderful World of Disney.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Fantastic one. Yeah, and the Bing Crosby song, that's always a Halloween must around this time of year. I do know, as far as I know that it was Washington Irving wrote it. I know that I didn't know if it was actually based on an actual legend or he just created it as a short story. And I know that the Headless Horseman is supposed to be a Hessian in that area during the Revolutionary War, but that's about the extent of my knowledge on the Headless Horseman.
All right, Ryan, you know a little bit. Okay, I'll give you that. No, I actually found out quite a bit on this tale. It's kind of interesting how it grows from just this little singular thing, actually overseas.
Overseas, all right.
Yeah, and you can actually. This is one of the most. When I went to research this, I thought this was absolutely fascinating because we talk about these folklore pieces a lot on here. We discuss them as topics, and this is, I think, one of the first ones, if not the first one, that we're going to talk about where you can, it's almost like a genealogical trace. You can actually see it move around the globe and how it gets over into America.
Okay, so it is a legend that traveled, because I was always under the impression that Irving wrote it on his own. All right, sweet.
No, so it is a legend of travel. So yeah, that's a little bit of snippet for you. So that's some of the fun stuff that I found about it tonight. But other than that, yeah, I just knew it was this crazy headless man whose head game wasn't very strong.
No wonder he's so mad he ain't getting no head. So.
Yes, we can release all those jokes right now. Get another good Lord, Ryan.
12-year-old Ryan has shown back up again. Exactly. He's already here.
Exactly.
That does not bode well for the show.
No.
Well, I'm going to jump right into it then because I've got a lot of fun stuff that I want to talk about. And Ryan, cut out the head jokes tonight. Anyways.
You can't shackle me. I will do what I want.
This is true, you will.
We apologize in advance.
Yeah. Well, imagine a cold, misty night. The woods cloaked in darkness. You hear the only sound you hear is the steady thud of hoofbeats approaching. You look around, but there's nothing. Just the stillness of the trees and the faint whisper of wind through the leaves. Then, thanks, Ryan, for the ambient noises.
Yes.
Are you going to let him get through his introduction?
Then, through the fog, you see him, a horseman, galloping toward you at breakneck speed, but there's something horribly wrong. He has no head. The air is thick with fear, and before you can react, he's gone. Or is he? Now, this is no ordinary ghost story. For centuries, this figure has haunted not just the imagination, but the very landscape of America, blending fact and fiction in a way that feels all too real. Now, whether you're a skeptic or a believer, there's no denying that the unsettling presence of the Headless Horseman, which is a tale steeped in blood, war, and the restless dead. It's a tale that blends history, fear, and mystery into one unforgettable image. A headless horseman who haunts the night, striking terror into the hearts of those who dare to cross his path. Now, the Headless Horseman became immortalized through Washington Irving's famous short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, Irving's tale is now a cultural touchstone for American Gothic folklore, a story that has seeped into the bones of Halloween traditions and haunted the minds of generations. Yet Irving didn't invent the figure. He drew on centuries of myths and legends from across the world, shaping the horseman into something uniquely American. A ghostly figure from the Revolutionary War, an omen of death, and a restless spirit in search of his lost head. This is a story deeply rooted in both history and the supernatural. And tonight we're journeying through the misty veil between the living and the dead, uncovering the origins of the horseman's terrifying legacy. From the ancient myths of Europe to the Revolutionary War battlefields of America, the Headless Horseman's tale still twists and turns, leaving behind a trail of questions. Is he merely a figment of overactive imaginations, or is there something darker, something real lurking deep in the woods of Sleepy Hollow? And with this tale, you might even find yourself questioning what lies beyond the veil of death and whether this Headless Horseman is still out there, waiting and watching. Now, the story of the Headless Horseman is much older and far more widespread than the version popularized by Washington Irving in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And in fact, the figure of the Headless Horseman appears in legends, folklore, and myths across multiple cultures, each with its own chilling twist to the tale. So before we dive into the American iteration of the legend, it's essential to understand the global origins of this figure and the themes that have made it a fixture in supernatural lore for centuries. Now, one of the most prominent precursors of the American Headless Horseman is the Dullahan. Now, that is a figure from Irish mythology, which is often associated with other Irish death omens, most notably the Banshee. Now,
what was it called again?
It's called a Dullahan.
Oh, Dullahan. Okay, I can see that. I can see it now at the bottom. Okay.
Yeah, Dullahan, Dullahan.
And if that's not what I thought you said.
You know what? It's all good. We're Texans here. We got accents. I'm going to say it the way it looks like on the screen, okay? So that's the way we're rolling with it. Well, the Dullahan is often described as a headless horseman who carries his own head under one arm, riding a black horse that charges through the night. In some versions of the tale, the Dullahan is a harbinger of death. Wherever he rides, someone is fated to die. The creature's head is said to have an eerie grin with eyes that can see vast distances and sometimes even through the veil of time itself. And its voice can even call out the name of the doomed individual sealing their fate.
Now, did you say that this kind of goes hand in hand with the Banshee, or they are two separate entities?
They are two. Yeah, they're basically both two. From what I was being able to research in the Irish mythology section of it, of this story, is that they're death omens essentially. So you have the Banshee, you have the Dullahan. That's really the only thing that connects the two of them, is that they're both kind of this death omen or not.
You just don't want to see either one of them. Gotcha.
You don't want to see either one of them. No, you don't want to scream. No, you don't want to hear no screaming, wailing woman or see this headless man riding toward you, because it's after that.
That's it.
You're pretty much done for. So well, unlike the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow, the Dullahan is not a ghost seeking revenge or justice. Instead, it functions as an agent of death itself, coming to claim the souls of the living. This myth provides a clear connection to the broader European traditions of Headless Horsemen, particularly in regions where death and battle were common occurrences. So the Dullahan's origins likely stem from ancient Celtic beliefs about the severed head being a very powerful symbol. Now, in Celtic culture, heads were often believed to house the soul and were the key to spiritual power, making decapitation a particularly fearsome and symbolic act. But in Celtic warrior traditions, taking the head of an enemy was seen as a way to gain their strength and power. And decapitated heads were often displayed as trophies, as we know they were across the globe, as history goes on. We're going to put your damn head on a stick and put it right by the front door, and don't solicit here.
Well, and tribal warriors, too. When we were talking about the missing Rockefeller, they would take the heads and they would shrink them, and so that's
they essentially owned you at that point,
right? Exactly,
pretty much,
they owned your soul.
Yeah, it was all about capturing the person's essence, the soul, all of that kind of stuff, conquering them, not just in this life but in the afterlife as well.
Right.
So in this sense, the Dullahan as a headless figure may represent a cursed warrior or an individual who has lost their spiritual essence, forever doomed to wander in search of what was lost. Now, in many variations of the legend, the Dullahan wields a whip made of a human spine.
Oh, that's so fucking metal.
I know.
I'm so cool.
I'll pull the picture back up too, because you can see him carrying the spine.
Oh,
right
is that
too.
What he had in his hand?
That's what he has in his hand. It's a human spine. Yeah. Well, this grisly weapon adds to its terrifying image as a figure of death and destruction. The whip is said to be used to lash out at those who try to impede its path, or those foolish enough to witness the Dullahan's journey.
Did you, in your research, did you find that is the Dullahan, is he pretty much his own master, or can people like send the Dullahan after someone?
So he's kind of along the lines, think Angel of Death.
Okay.
Angel of Death comes for you, it's the Dullahan that's coming for you. It's basically everything that I read. It's like when he shows up, you hear the hoof beats, you hear all that kind of stuff, the head calls your name. It's your time.
He's coming to wreck. He's coming to wreck shop. Nobody sent him after you. He's just coming to collect.
He's just coming to collect. That's basically it. Now, I wasn't able to find like anything like a person had to do such and such to get him to come or anything like that. Heard it when I said it. That sounded dirty. But you know what I mean. So there wasn't like a precursor, and then the Dullahan shows up.
Okay, gotcha.
You know, it was just everything that I read. It was like he just shows up, and if you
he's
hear
kind
him,
of like the Grim Reaper.
Right.
Whenever he shows up, you're done.
You're just done for. It's like your number's been called, so to speak. So, well, in some stories, a single crack of the whip can blind or even kill onlookers, reinforcing the idea that this creature is not to be trifled with. But unlike other supernatural creatures that might announce their presence with terrifying sounds or eerie moans, the Dullahan often travels in an unnerving silence. The only sound associated with it are the thunderous pounding of the horse hooves and the occasional cracking of the spine whip. But the Dullahan isn't just a solitary figure. It's often depicted as part of a larger ominous scene. In some versions of this same myth, the Dullahan rides a black spectral horse, and in others, sometimes even a coach, known as a Quishta Bower or a silent or death coach. I hear Shelly giggling in the background.
This gets cooler as it goes along. This is the most.
Oh, right?
Cool. This is so awesome.
But the coolest thing about this is like sometimes I read, I did not actually, I missed this point in this part of the story, and I'm just going to tell it here. Sometimes even this coach with the horse, it's always being pulled by like 4, 6, or 8 horses in every story that I found. And sometimes even the horses themselves are headless.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes the wheels are on fire. I mean, it just gets fucking badass. Cool. You know?
Hey, where'd they get my damn coach from? They better bring it back.
Yeah, and so it's typically described as basically like this kind of horse-drawn carriage by these black horses, flaming wheels, kind of barreling through the countryside.
Blasting Slayer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I like to walk into a room, baby, just like that.
Well, the arrival of the coach along with the Dullahan signals that someone in the vicinity is about to die. That is their omen there. So, but this all just adds it further adds to the otherworldly terror that the Dullahan has.
Okay.
So the Dullahan's role as a deathbringer, combined with its terrifying appearance and characteristics, has led it to become one of the most memorable figures in Irish folklore. However, one strange and somewhat unexpected weakness of the Dullahan is its fear of gold. Even a small amount, whether it be a coin or an item of jewelry, is said to have the power to repel the Dullahan and send it fleeing.
I must be related. I'm scared of gold too. No.
I'm not. You can buy all the gold you want from me. I'm good. And this
avoid that like the plague.
Well, this detail makes the Dullahan distinct from many other deathly figures, which are usually depicted as these unstoppable forces, like the Grim Reaper, the Angel of Death, stuff like that. The presence of this vulnerability adds a layer of complexity to the myth, suggesting that there may be some way for the living to protect themselves from this otherwise unstoppable being. Well, moving, and literally when I say moving, we're going to move the tradition because this is how it flows. Moving beyond Ireland, we now start to encounter, as time goes on, these similar legends that start to pop up in Germany and Scandinavia and their traditions. It kind of starts to make this little sweep, if you will. Now, in Germany, stories started to circulate about a headless horseman, particularly headless hunters who roamed the forests at night.
Now there's more than one of them.
Now there's more than one of them, yes. Because you're about to see how big this thing just explodes here in just a second. Because one famous example of the tale of the Headless Horseman who appears in the German region of Lower Saxony is known as the Wild Huntsman. This spectral figure is said to hunt the living, both animal and human, and his presence is often interpreted as a warning of impending danger or death. But like the Irish Dullahan, this Headless Huntsman has no clear motives about terrorizing those who cross his path. I mean, it just happens. You cross his path, you're
I mean, it's
done
like
for.
coming across a snake. A snake does what a snake does.
That's true.
You don't have to have a reason for it.
Yeah. But this wild huntsman, what I found interesting, this is where the story just boom, is widely associated with the folklore surrounding the wild hunt. Now, the wild hunt involves...
Make sure you get that H on there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Wild hunt.
He's talking about...
It's a hunt. Like you go hunt for deer. God damn it. I'm Texan. I can't help it. Anyways. We're going to let the team collect themselves real quick while we just show this picture of this ungodly apocalypse that is happening on the screen.
That is one wild hunt right there.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, moving on. The wild hunt. I'm muting her, Mike. The wild hunt involves a chase led by a mythological figure, often associated with Odin. I can't talk now because Shelly's laughing in the damn background. This is what happens. Let me start that again. I'm just going to say the hunt. The hunt.
Gotcha.
Involves a chase led by a mythological figure, often associated with Odin and Germanic legends, but can also be led by historical or legendary figures like Theodoric the Great, or biblical figures such as Herod, Cain, and the devil. This ghostly group of hunters typically includes the souls of the dead, ghostly dogs, or other supernatural beings like fairies, valkyries, or elves. You okay over there, Shelly?
Wild Hunt's my new band name.
Damn.
Just ignore me. I'll collect myself in a second.
Okay.
Go ahead and mute me back.
Okay. Well, encountering the wild hunt is considered a bad omen, with those who witness it often facing misfortune, illness, or death. The hunt symbolizes the inevitability of death and the thin boundary between the living and the dead. It is often associated with winter and the winter festivals like Yule or Samhain, and reflects ancient beliefs about supernatural forces that roam freely during the dark months.
Like, I'm just seeing in my head when you're talking about this, like Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia, where like everything is coming up out of the ground.
Everything is just...
Yeah, and
like,
the devil is leading everything.
Yep,
That's kind of what I'm visualizing here.
That's a great visualization. Like, it's just everything's being bombarded at this moment with all these different types of entities. But the hunt often serves as a form of divine retribution, targeting sinners or those who have violated sacred laws, while also embodying chaos and the uncontrollable aspects of nature. So this tapestry of folklore not only spans Germanic traditions, but also the realms of the Scandinavian traditions as well. We're moving away from the huntsman now. Thank God we can unmute Shelley. Well, Scandinavian folklore is rich with its own interpretations of Headless Horseman, often linked to the tragic fates of warriors and soldiers who perished in battle. This is kind of the first time that we see this theory come into play, that you're going to see come back in America. Mm-hmm. And one prominent figure is the Haxprocessum. Practice that.
I'm glad you said it, not me.
I practice that all day long, which is vaguely known as like the witch trials for them. This introduces tales of these headless knights believed to roam the land, seeking vengeance for their untimely death. That's kind of when this appeared, when that whole situation was happening. These ghostly figures are not just random apparitions. They were often depicted as restless souls cursed to wander the earth due to their very violent ends. Now, in the Norse sagas, such as the saga of the Yinglings, there are accounts of warriors who, upon dying in combat, became Druger, I believe is how it's pronounced, which are undead beings who retain their human forms, albeit very grotesque and decaying state, but they're headless.
So, like zombies.
Zombies, exactly.
Okay.
So their decapitated bodies symbolize this incomplete journey to the afterlife. It signifies like this disruption in the natural order and the warrior's inability to transition peacefully into the realm of death. So you start to see all these, it's like you have the headless, the Dullahan basically is kind of like the mother figure, if you will. And then it starts to kind of produce these kids, and then there's more offspring and more offspring and more offspring. And it just starts to rapidly kind of grow in that area. Now, these tales reveal a common theme: the headless figure as a symbol of death, vengeance, or unrest. In many cases, these horsemen are not merely ghosts, but supernatural entities tied to the land, war, or unfulfilled destinies. That's pretty much encompassing everything that's happening at this time over there with these figures. The idea of the headless figure on horseback is very powerful. It combines two fears: the fear of a violent death, decapitation, very brutal form of execution, and the fear of encountering the supernatural. I mean, everybody's got you can think of a bunch of people who have a fear of both of those,
Right.
Not us.
We're good.
But what ends up happening is at this point is when European settlers arrived in America, they brought with them not only these hopes for a new life and all that stuff, but their old world legend stories and fears. Now, the Dutch, which is basically the area we just came from, the Dutch settlers in the Hudson River Valley were no exception to that. And they brought with them their own version of the Headless Horseman to American soil. So that is how it hops the pond, so to speak, and gets up here.
Settles into that Sleepy Hollow region.
Yes, correct.
Right.
So now you're in the Hudson River Valley, and this story has now been brought over. And now if you think of the Hudson River Valley, we know just how freaking kind of haunted that area is.
Oh, yeah.
They start building on it. So over time, these old European stories begin to take on this new shape in a very uniquely American landscape. And it starts melding this local history and geography to form what would eventually become Washington Irving's Headless Horseman. Now, one key historical figure often linked to the origins of the American Headless Horseman is the Hessian soldier, like Ryan was saying at the very beginning. During the American Revolutionary War, the British employed Hessian mercenaries, German soldiers basically hired to fight against the American rebels. And the Hessian troops became infamous for their brutality in battle, particularly in the northern colonies. And many Hessians died during the war far from their homeland, and the headless figure of Irving's story is thought to be based on one of those soldiers. Now, according to local lore, a Hessian trooper was decapitated by an American cannonball during the Battle of White Plains in 1776. So this gory image of a headless soldier dressed in like bloodstained uniform riding a spectral horse in search of his head became a very common story passed down by locals in the Hudson River Valley. And so that's really the beginning of it in America, is this local lore that this artilleryman basically was decapitated.
Okay, and you have people who were seeing this on the battlefield, and if this did happen, which I don't doubt that it did, because it probably happened somewhere at some point during the Revolution, that horse may have rode off into the wilderness and showed up in a town with a decapitated soldier on its back, and people were like,
never know.
"That's the fucking horseman."
Very well could have. Very well could. But I will actually touch on later on in the story, I will actually touch on the little bit of truth that's actually been uncovered recently.
Okay.
That could lend some credibility to this actual story. So basically this legend in the area suggests that the soldier's ghost still roams the area. He's eternally seeking his lost head. He's not going to rest until he's made whole again. That whole thing. You can't rest until his whole body's put to sleep. Well, this blending of old European folklore with a distinctly American historical context is part of what gives the story of the Headless Horseman its enduring power. It almost revitalizes it in a way. So while the figure of the Headless Horseman may have originated in Europe, it found very fertile ground in American imagination, where this trauma of war and death could very easily, and as we know, very easily did take on supernatural overtones. Because we've talked about, people reaching out to mediums and all of that kind of stuff during this time.
Mm-hmm.
So Sleepy Hollow, especially, which is the setting for Washington Irving's tale, is a small village nestled along the Hudson River in New York, for those that may not be aware. It is known for its very eerie, kind of misty-filled woods, very quiet, isolated atmosphere. So it became like this perfect location for such a ghostly legend to take root.
It's very Salem-like. I've seen videos of people walking through Sleepy Hollow, and it is that when you imagine like a Halloween fall landscape, Sleepy Hollow is what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the question is why has this legend remained so strong? So whether we look to those ancient myths of the Dullahan or the more recent tales of the headless Hessian soldier, this recurring image of the Headless Horseman speaks to a deeper fear embodied in the human consciousness. It's the fear of death, particularly an untimely one or a violent one that leaves you don't have peace. There's a lot of people who are like, I'm not going to have peace whenever I die. It scares the shit out of me. So that's one figure of it, of why I think that it kind of endures. This severed head itself, as we were previously saying, becomes a very powerful symbol of that unresolved fate. So in many ways, the Headless Horseman serves as a ghostly reminder of mortality. And I think that that's why he kind of clings on as much as he does. It's the fact that the horseman is headless adds another layer of fear. It strips away his humanity. It leaves behind something very monstrous, very unnatural, very terrifying, which we know seeps into basically everybody's untapped fears that we have. It's both familiar and alien. It was once human, but it no longer possesses rationality, expression, or identity that basically comes with a face. Instead, it becomes this force of nature now. And it's driven, it has to be, if it doesn't have a face, doesn't have a head, we as human think it's driven by some dark, unknown purpose.
Right.
So I think that that's a lot of things of why and how he is kind of stuck around as long as he has.
And I may be jumping your story by asking this question, but I know the jack-o'-lantern comes into play as being like his surrogate head. Are you going to go into that, or is that?
I actually did not find anything about how the jack-o'-lantern actually becomes. I want to say that was probably just a piece of a variation of the story told later on, that maybe some other author or something like that pulled into the mix to make it a little more terrifying.
Okay.
But I actually never really found the moment that gets pulled into the mix of it.
Okay, because what you were saying about the dehumanization of whatever the Hessian is supposed to be, that jack-o'-lantern kind of adds on to that because it's just an inanimate face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the figure of the horseman also taps into this idea of vengeance. In stories where the horseman is seeking revenge, the headless figure becomes even more frightening because it represents justice from beyond the grave. It's not just a ghostly apparition anymore. It's a symbol of wrongs that were never made right in life. The horseman's relentless pursuit, whether it be for his lost head, revenge, or simply closure, turns the tale into a story of basically unstoppable supernatural forces at this point. And so the American Headless Horseman really encapsulates like all of these elements: the death, the revenge, and the restless spirit. Because in all the other ones, it's more or less just kind of, it's a restless spirit, or it's revenge, or it's death. Here in America, it's got all of it. So I think that that's what makes the American version of it so unique.
Mm-hmm.
So he's this figure caught between worlds. He's unable to rest, eternally searching for something he's never going to find. So whether he's a product of folklore or the traumatized memory of war, his legend has survived for centuries because it speaks to all the primal fears we all share. Going back to that fear of unknown, fear of death, basically list them off, whatever you want.
Right.
Well, all of that gets set up. And then in 1820, we're going to touch on what Ryan said in the beginning. American author Washington Irving published The Legend of Sleepy Hollow as part of his short story collection titled The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon. Now, this iconic tale would become one of the most enduring and well-known pieces of American Gothic literature, establishing Irving as a prominent voice in early American fiction. Now, it is set in the late 18th century in the quiet Dutch settlement of Sleepy Hollow, New York, and the story combines the supernatural with the psychological as it tells the tale of this monstrous headless horseman terrorizing the local population. The story represents a unique blend of American and European folklore traditions, borrowing from the tales of ghostly horsemen found in both those Germanic and Scandinavian legends. And Irving's ability to take these old world stories and embed them into the growing American identity gave The Legend of Sleepy Hollow an air of familiarity, while introducing readers to a distinctly American brand of Gothic horror. Absolutely love this. I don't know if y'all have read it. Have you ever read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow or listened to it or anything like that?
Yeah, I read it in school and then watching the Disney version growing up. And yeah, I mean, Washington Irving was, he had a way with words, and his writing is beautiful.
It is.
And it's a very fun story. I love it reading around Halloween. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually listened to the audio version of it. So while I was doing this, I was just typing away, like listening to the actual Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I'm like, this feels very full circle moment right here. Like, I hated it when I was in school. I had to write a paper over it. Now I'm writing a topic research paper over it essentially while listening to it. Come full circle. Well, at the heart of the story is Ichabod Crane, an awkward and superstitious school teacher who comes to Sleepy Hollow to teach the children of the town. Ichabod's character contrasts sharply with the rugged, practical men of the frontier. He's intellectual yet gullible, constantly absorbing local legends, ghost stories, making him a very easy target for fear of manipulation. Irving's story intertwines Ichabod's encounter with the horseman with his pursuit of Katrina von Tassel, which is a local heiress. His romantic ambitions are complicated by Brom Bones, a very burly, mischievous rival who competes for Katrina's affections. Now, many interpretations of the tale suggest that the climactic chase scene in which Ichabod is pursued by the Headless Horseman, I think we all know that scene, may actually be a prank orchestrated by Brom Bones. And Ichabod's nervous and high-strung nature sets the stage for this dramatic climax of the tale. And so this vagueness adds depth to the story, allowing to straddle a line between supernatural and psychological. So if you've never read it, it's actually kind of short. But it's pretty enjoyable. So the central figure that haunts Ichabod and the reader, obviously, is the Headless Horseman. Duh. But Irving's description of the horseman is deliberately eerie, as he paints a picture of a very large, imposing figure mounted on a black steed, holding his decapitated head in the crook of his arm. And I think that that's where some iteration later on, Ryan brings in like a jack-o'-lantern, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he uses the local folklore of the actual Hessian soldier who lost his head to a cannonball, that one, to bring about the Headless Horseman's story. And since then, the Headless Horseman has become iconic, representing this perfect fusion of supernatural terror and in a historical narrative.
Blake, you had said something. I'm sorry. You said something about the dark steed that he rode on. And I can't remember. And anywhere in the story, does it mention the red glowing eyes of the horse?
Oh,
because a lot of times it's depicted in pictures and in
it is, and a lot
it's
of
depicted with the eyes of the steed also being red and glowing.
Right.
So I was just curious,
and now
I couldn't recall.
I was gonna say, now going back and listening to it and all that kind of stuff and doing all the research, I don't think I ever came across anything that said anything or remember hearing, because like I said, I only listened to the audio version of the actual Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I was typing paper at the same time, so I don't know. They could have said it. I was half-assed listening. I'm not gonna lie.
I was just curious. I was curious because I was, whenever I'm thinking of the depiction of it, I always think again the big burly, headless horseman on the steed. But I always seem to remember that the eyes of the horse glow red. So I was just wondering if that was artistic liberty.
I mean,
or if it was...
I think some of it. I think a lot of people take artistic liberty with that because I mean, as you can tell, like in this photo, the eyes are glowing red. And that photo they're not. But a lot of the photos I did come across, he does have those glowing red eyes, so to speak.
Okay.
So, but I don't remember coming across anything in all the research and listening to the story and whatnot that says anything about laying out like it had glowing red eyes.
Right. And so I wonder if that parallels one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is Death, because Death's steed also has red glowing eyes. Yeah. So I wondered if that's a parallel that
it could be
Washington Irving pulled from to create this image.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well. Well, one of the most striking aspects of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is its exploration of the fear and the supernatural. Irving's portrayal of fear is psychological as much as it is supernatural. He blurs that line between reality and imagination, leaving the reader to wonder if Ichabod's encounter with the horseman was truly otherworldly or simply the result of his own paranoia, fueled by the tales of the locals. He uses the setting of Sleepy Hollow, that isolated, eerie town with an atmosphere thick with folklore and superstition, to amplify the tension in the story. And the characters themselves live in a state of constant awareness of the supernatural, easily swayed by ghost stories and legends. And this makes Ichabod a perfect protagonist to be ensnared by the legend of the Headless Horseman. But the story also taps deeper into cultural anxieties of the American public. And you got to think, the reason why I'm kind of going so far into this is because when this story comes out, we now have the story of the American Headless Horseman. Bam, here's the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now people are reading it. Mm-hmm. And they're like reading it and they're going, they have these real life cultural anxieties of this stuff happening in their area. And they're like, shit, look, somebody's documenting what we're going through, Yes, it's fiction. We get it. But the more that you read it and the more that you live it and stuff, it becomes more real to you. And so I think with the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, it just kind of solidifies the American Headless Horseman story.
Right.
So but Sleepy Hollow is a town populated by those Dutch settlers and represents a world clinging on to those old European traditions and beliefs. However, it was first known as North Tarrytown. The town actually did not change its name to Sleepy Hollow until 1996. And that was more than likely to draw upon the tourism aspect of the name. So through these characters and symbols, Irving explores how history and folklore blend to create that uniquely American sense of the uncanny. And I found it so interesting that so many years after this story comes out, now the town switches. And that was even 3 years before Tim Burton's film came out. So
I didn't know that it wasn't until 96.
I thought that was a lie.
neither.
I researched and researched because I was like, nah, that don't sound right. That don't sound
Yeah.
real. Like, that's
Right.
got to be fake. But no, everything that I found said that North Tarrytown changed its name in 1996 to Sleepy Hollow. So it's only been legit Sleepy Hollow for, what is that, like less than 30 years?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Mhm.
28 years, something like that.
Yes.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
We're not supposed to have to do math on this show. Stop it.
Stop making me feel old.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Well, Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow has endured as a quintessential piece of American folklore, inspiring countless adaptations in literature, film, and television. From that famous Disney animated adaptation to even Tim Burton's 1999 film, Sleepy Hollow, the story's iconic characters and eerie atmosphere has left an indelible mark on popular culture. And the image of Headless Horseman continues to appear in various forms of media and has become a timeless symbol for Halloween and American Gothic storytelling. How many times do you see a commercial right now that's like, you see the horseman rear up on its back? You know, usually it's like spirit store or whatever.
Have you seen the one? I guess it's a Snickers commercial, the horseless headsman, where it's a giant head with like little legs or whatever. Because you're not you and you're hungry. You have to eat a Snickers.
Moving on. But this work actually helped to lay the foundation for the development of the horror genre, like especially setting the stage for people like Edgar Allan Poe and later on Stephen King. Well, Elizabeth Bradley, who's a historian with the historic Hudson Valley, suggests that one of the most probable inspirations for Washington Irving's horseman character can be traced to Sir Walter Scott's 1796 work called The Chase. Mm-hmm. Now, in this piece is a translation of a German poem known as The Wild Huntsman. Stop it, Shelley. By Gottfried, I'm going to call him Berger because that's what it looks like to me. I'm sure it's like Booger or Bouger or Bouget or something, which itself is thought to draw from Norse mythology. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's Burger, okay? But I'm pretty sure over there it's like Bouget or something. Well, she says, quote, Irving had recently formed a friendship with Scott in 1817, so it's very likely that Scott's writing had a significant influence on him. And the poem tells the story of an evil hunter who is condemned to relentlessly be pursued by the devil and the, quote, hounds of hell as retribution for his crimes. So it has very similar kind of connotation as the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, Washington Irving himself actually spent his early years living in Manhattan, but in 1798, a yellow fever broke out in the city, and to keep him safe, Irving was sent to Tarrytown to stay with a friend until the illness passed. Now, while he was there, he learned about the village that would later be known as Sleepy Hollow, and he also picked up on the Dutch culture from the locals and heard plenty of those ghost stories that we've been talking about. And in one of his letters, he wrote, quote, villagers spoke in hushed whispers of the strange cries heard in the woods where the captured British spy John Andre had been hanged. So I found that kind of interesting. But not only that, but according to New York Times, there's an interesting blend of folklore and history when it comes to the character of Ichabod Crane. There was a real-life Colonel Ichabod B. Crane who lived during the same time as Washington Irving. Now, Washington Irving came across his name, Ichabod Crane, in a newspaper, and he really liked it. And so he took it. And the real Crane, who served in the War of 1812, lived at the same time. They never actually met. They were stationed even together at like Fort Pike, but their paths never crossed from everything that I could find. And the real Crane actually never lived in Sleepy Hollow or Tarrytown.
Did he ever comment on his name being used in the book?
Crane had a very long military career, serving 45 years, and the real Crane was not too happy at all or pleased about Washington Irving using his name in the story. Because you see, he saw himself as the complete opposite of the fictional Ichabod. He basically was like, if I'd encountered the Headless Horseman, I wouldn't have run away. Bullshit.
And wasn't he like a big burly dude too?
He was. Yeah.
Oh,
he was a big burly dude. Yeah. So
you got a small wiener without telling me you got a small wiener.
Well, it seems that school teachers Samuel Youngs and Jesse Merwin were the real inspiration for the personality of Ichabod. Youngs and Irving were actually good friends. And Youngs was very happy to be the model for the fictional Ichabod. And he himself is actually buried in the old Dutch church in Sleepy Hollow, which is where a lot of Washington Irving's story takes place. Now, the other inspiration, Jesse Merwin, he was a school teacher in Kinderhook, New York, about 100 miles north. And the schoolhouse where he taught is still standing, and it's appropriately named the Ichabod Crane Schoolhouse. So, interestingly enough, though, when Irving wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the town didn't actually exist. And some actually say he may have even come up with the name Sleepy Hollow himself. There was a real bridge, though, that led to an old Dutch churchyard, like I was just talking about. But that bridge no longer stands, and instead, the town built a memorial bridge in the cemetery with a plaque marking where the original one stood. So this town really kind of incorporates all of these elements as much as they can. Now, in the cemetery, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Very interesting. In this cemetery, there exists a story in the area about an unmarked grave of a Revolutionary War soldier. Yes, that soldier from the same battle mentioned earlier. And yes, this soldier was decapitated by a cannonball during the Battle of White Plains, as we previously mentioned. This soldier is known as the Headless Hessian of the Hollow in this little unmarked grave. And so this is kind of a great example of how Washington Irving's story really kind of helped, I guess you could say, people deal with the trauma of war by turning America's enemy into the villain.
Right.
So I'm going to say that it is really hard to say whether or not a real decapitated Hessian soldier ever did exist and is in that grave, especially since record keeping was very
spotty at best.
Spotty at best back then.
But they turned it into something fun to try to help everyone.
Hold on. However, in a TikTok video by Carter Rodney, I'm going to call his name out, give him his props. He mentions that on November the 1st, 1776, Major General William Heath wrote in his diary about a cannonball taking off the head of a Hessian artilleryman. And this diary entry has alleged to have been found. And it does match the actual story of the Headless Hessian of the Hollow and all the notes of the burial. And it is worth noting that White Plains, where this battle took place, is only about 10 miles from Sleepy Hollow.
So we actually have some documentation.
So you have a little
back
bit of
up the legitimacy of the story of at least the person becoming the Headless Horseman.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I found that really kind of cool because I don't know if we've ever talked about another folklore tradition that has documentation that has been alleged to have been found. Now I say alleged. I was not ever able to confirm that it was found because everything that I read said that they found this, they found that. I didn't find the documentation itself, so I'm going to say alleged.
But you can find the grave, though. You can find that grave.
From what I understand, yes.
I don't know many people who just dig a hole and put up a marker and say, yeah, there's somebody here, if there isn't. So I would think that if they went to the time and expense to create a marker to dig a hole, that there's probably someone in it, more than likely. You go look. I'm not gonna. But yeah, I like knowing that there's Washington Irving pulled from a legitimate story to make this, because I actually really thought that it was all kind of just conjecture and storytelling.
No, he's actually pulling from real life kind of folkloric traditions and legends. And now there's a little bit of documentation behind it to kind of support it. So I thought that was really very interesting. Well, this blending of fiction and reality often happens because stories have a way of becoming part of the culture over time. When a tale is passed down, retold, and shared, as I was saying earlier, it starts to feel real, especially if it's based on familiar pieces or inspired by historical events and people, like we're starting to find out about this. Now, while ghost stories like the Headless Horseman capture our imaginations with their eerie charm, it is essential to consider the role that psychology and science does or might play in explaining these phenomena. So I kind of want to flip the script on us a little bit. And where we usually show you how we walked through like debunking and being like, oh, we can't explain it, it's paranormal. I'm actually going to play devil advocate for a second. And kind of look at this lens of scientific skepticism so that we can explore how certain psychological phenomena, such as the Headless Horseman, can lead people to perceive supernatural events that may not actually be there. So this question first first question we have is, do we see these entities because we expect to see them, or is there something more to these experiences? One of the most common psychological explanations for ghost sightings, particularly those involving figures like the Headless Horseman, is the phenomenon known as, and I'm about to butcher it because I do it every time on the phone, pareidolia. Did I get it right?
You did. Pareidolia.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, pareidolia refers to the brain's tendency to recognize familiar patterns, often faces or figures, in random or ambiguous stimuli, like looking at leaves, all that stuff. You start to see faces. It's like it's the same. You might see shapes in clouds, faces in tree bark, or hidden messages, and you'll hear hidden messages in songs when they're played backwards or something like that. The human brain's wired to find order in chaos, to make sense of the world by recognizing patterns, even where none exist. So this trait was likely an evolutionary advantage, helping early humans identify potential threats very quickly. However, it also means that when we're walking alone in the dark, surrounded by shadows and unfamiliar sounds, our brain can misinterpret these ordinary events, such as the wind, those distant noises, as something more sinister. Now, in the case of Headless Horseman, or any ghostly figure for that matter, pareidolia may explain why someone might, quote, see the apparition of a Headless Horseman on a foggy, moonlit night. This distant figure, obscured by darkness, our own anxieties. You might misinterpret something in the distance as a supernatural entity. So the eerie environment of places like Sleepy Hollow, characterized by those misty woods and winding roads and dark secluded corners, everything that comes to mind,
right?
That further primes your mind to perceive shapes and figures that might not truly exist. So this leads to the next question of the scientific skepticism is, how many supposed sightings are actually a trick of the mind, with pareidolia turning natural elements like shadows and distant shapes into frightening apparitions? For that, we end up looking further into another psychological factor, which is the power of suggestion. So humans are highly susceptible to suggestion, especially when we are in environments that are charged with mystery, superstition, or fear. When we hear stories about haunted locations like the Tale of the Headless Horseman, we become primed to experience something paranormal. So our expectations set the stage for us to interpret normal events such as that flickering light or that cold draft or that distant sound as this ghostly presence. We've done it. Well, I was going to say, we've done it before. You hear like a high-pitched whistling and you're like, oh, that's just the wind coming through the window. Okay, we got it now.
Well, yeah, you take us, because initially your brain is trying to find that order in chaos, and you have to wait a minute and think about it and then kind of figure out your environment and figure out what's going on around you. Like you said, you hear that whistle, it's, oh, okay, that's just the wind. Or, oh, that knock was something falling. That wasn't necessarily a knock.
Especially if you know the story and you're in this location, you're in this environment. If you know this story, the mind is already on alert for these supernatural occurrences. So you can twist like everyday events into these ghostly experiences.
And that's why I like to go in blind. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to be influenced.
Now, this phenomenon is particularly potent in group settings where fear can spread quickly through suggestion. If one person claims to have seen something ghostly, others may more likely believe and even, quote, see it too, feeding into this collective experience that may be entirely driven by suggestion than reality. So is it possible that some of our most iconic ghost stories, like the Headless Horseman, may have endured not because they're real, but because the power of suggestion is so strong that it becomes self-reinforcing?
And mass hysteria. That's what it turns into.
Yeah.
Watch a crowd. If you don't believe me, watch a crowd.
Well, that lends into another layer that is worth considering with the scientific skepticism, and that is the role of cultural and social conditioning. Now, from a young age, we are exposed to stories about ghosts, spirits, supernatural that are told through books, movies, folklore, and those often shape our expectations and kind of beliefs about the world. In cultures where ghost stories are prominent, people may be more inclined to believe in and report ghostly encounters. Now, the legend of the Headless Horseman is a prime example of how folklore can shape perceptions. Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow has become so deeply ingrained in American culture that it's difficult to almost separate the story from the place itself. Sleepy Hollow has become synonymous with ghostly encounters, and anyone who visits is likely to feel the weight of the cultural association of that. So in this sense, our belief in ghosts, or our tendency to interpret these events as supernatural, is a product of the stories that we've been told. So the more we hear about a particular legend, the more likely we are to believe in it, especially if we find ourselves in environments tied to those stories. It's like if you go visit, I'm sure if we go visit Sleepy Hollow, we'd be like, what is it? Oh, that was the Headless Horseman. Oh shit. We got to go.
Yeah.
I would be that dick though on like the little pony on the stick with a cape on and all that stuff. And like with the collar up above my head and just riding through town like,
I would give you $5.
But even people who are skeptical of the supernatural may find themselves questioning their beliefs when confronted with a place steeped in ghostly lore. So are these entity sightings and supernatural experiences simply a result of culture and conditioning? Do we see what we've been taught to see? I think in this context, the Headless Horseman becomes less a figure of supernatural and more of a product of the collective imagination. It's shaped by centuries of storytelling. So I know Ryan's just trying to hold it back.
I can see that, but I mean, what you're talking about with pareidolia and the power suggestion, I think that they're painting with a broad brush. I think it really just depends on who you're talking to, and how they.
Oh, well, I got more for you, my friend. Don't worry.
Go ahead,
we got 2 more layers to this skepticism to discuss real quick.
Go right ahead.
Well, the next part that asks, that we have to take a look at when we're looking at stories like this, if we're going to be investigators and try and debunk certain things, the Headless Horseman being what we're debunking, or not debunking, but looking at tonight.
Mm-hmm.
We have to question not only the existence of ghosts, but also the reliability of human perception. Our senses, while powerful, are far from infallible. We know that the mind can be easily tricked, and our memories of events are often imperfect. So when people claim to have seen the Headless Horseman, what are they truly seeing? In many cases, supernatural experiences occur in conditions of low visibility, at night, in fog, dimly lit areas, or daring times of heightened emotional stress. Under such conditions, the mind is more prone to make mistakes, interpreting these vague events in ways that align with our expectations of fear or fears.
Mm-hmm.
For example, seeing a horse and a horseman in the distance during a dark, foggy night might immediately bring to mind the figure of the Headless Horseman, especially if the observer is familiar with the legend. And moreover, memory is malleable. And stories about ghost encounters often grow or elaborate with time. A fleeting glimpse of something ambiguous over time becomes a more detailed recollection of a full-on encounter with a Headless Horseman. And this is a process known as memory reconstruction, where the mind fills in the gaps of our recollection based on expectations, beliefs, or suggestions from others. So, can we trust our senses when it comes to these ghostly entity encounters like the Headless Horseman? Or are we more than likely to experience what we want to see? And that leads to the last one, which is we have to consider whether ghosts are not real entities, but rather projections of our own fears and anxieties. And we've talked about this quite a few times, actually. So
right.
The mind, especially when stressed, tired, or frightened, can conjure up images that feel very real, but are in fact the result of internal psychological processes. Ghosts, then, or Headless Horseman, might not be external forces haunting us, but rather manifestations of unresolved fears, grief, or trauma. So in this light, the Headless Horseman can be seen as a collective projection of a community's anxiety, where there is that fear of death, unknown, or the lingering consequences of war.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think the figure of the Headless Horseman endlessly pursuing his quarry might be a metaphor for the way that unresolved issues from past continue to chase us, no matter how much we try to outrun them. Right. Especially like in that area where it was all, with the
doom and gloom and death and
doom and gloom. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no discussion of the Headless Horseman could be complete without addressing the paranormal phenomena surrounding Sleepy Hollow itself. Now, this small town we're going to go into just a little bit here, nestled along the Hudson River in New York, is not only famous for Washington Irving's legendary tale, but it also is regarded as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. The legend of the Headless Horseman has left such a lasting mark on the area that Sleepy Hollow has become a paranormal hotspot, attracting ghost hunters, tourists, and thrill seekers alike. But are there really ghostly encounters in Sleepy Hollow?
Yes.
Let's find out. Does the horseman's presence still linger along its dark, winding roads?
Question.
It does. Yeah.
Before we get into it, is Sleepy Hollow located in the Bridgewater Triangle?
Oh, I didn't look that up. Shit. I should have looked that up.
With it being in the Hudson Valley and in upstate New York, I would assume, but I'm not sure. That's why I was wondering.
I didn't even think about that. Shit. I'll have to look it up and post later on, in the comments whether it is or isn't. That's a good point, Ryan. Damn, I should have checked with you, man, before I continue. Anyways, Sleepy Hollow's connection to the supernatural goes beyond just the legend of the Headless Horseman. The area itself has a long history of reported hauntings, stretching back hundreds of years, with residents and visitors claiming to have witnessed inexplicable phenomena. Sleepy Hollow has dense forests, misty riverbanks, and centuries-old graveyards. It exudes a natural eeriness that has fueled its reputation as a haunted destination. Now, according to local lore, the real town of Sleepy Hollow and the surrounding Hudson Valley have become home to numerous ghost sightings, strange apparitions, UFOs, and eerie sounds that cannot be easily explained. And many of these reports are tied to the Headless Horseman. with locals and tourists alike claiming to have felt a very unnerving presence while walking alone at night, or even hearing the faint sound of hoofbeats echoing in the distance. The legend is so deeply intertwined in the town's identity that it's hard to visit without feeling a chill down your spine. That old Dutch church and its graveyard, one of the most famous locations for Irving Tell, is often cited as a hotspot for paranormal activity. Visitors have reported seeing shadowy figures among headstones, hearing whispers in the wind, and even catching glimpses of a riderless horse galloping through the fog. Whether these experiences are the result of overactive imaginations or something more, the sense of unease in Sleepy Hollow is very palpable. Go ahead, Ryan.
I'll say I don't doubt that maybe there could be people could hear hoof beats or they could see a riderless horse because people were in that valley for, I mean, even the Native Americans probably for thousands of years. So I'm sure there's something running. There's probably some residual energy running around.
Oh, I'm sure.
Probably hear.
I'm sure. Yeah.
As you're out late at night.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, while Sleepy Hollow is undoubtedly the focal point of the Headless Horseman legend, the Hudson Valley region surrounding it is also steeped in supernatural tales. The dense forests and winding roads that hug the Hudson River have inspired ghost stories for centuries, with many locals claiming the valley is very haunted by spirits long gone. Some believe that the spirits of the soldiers who died in the Revolutionary War, I'm probably going to assume, Ryan, that it is part of the Bridgewater Triangle if they're talking, with all of this. When I came across
UFOs and everything,
all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to assume it's either going to be very close or within the Bridgewater Triangle. But the spirits of the soldiers who died in the Revolutionary War, including the possible inspiration for the Horsemen, still roam the area, seeking revenge or closure for their untimely deaths. Numerous ghost hunters and paranormal investigators have explored the Hudson Valley, hoping to document evidence of hauntings. Some claim to have captured strange orbs, unexplained light phenomena, or eerie EVP recordings that suggest the presence of restless spirits. Others speak of cold spots, sensations of being watched, or sudden feelings of dread that just they seem to descend without warning. So it's not just ghost hunters who believe in the hauntings of Sleepy Hollow and the surrounding areas. Many residents of the Hudson Valley have shared stories passed down through generations, recounting ghostly apparitions seen on quiet roads at night, often accompanied by the sound of galloping hooves. Now, in particular, the infamous road where Ichabod Crane was allegedly chased by the Headless Horseman is said to be haunted, with people reporting sightings of a dark figure on horseback disappearing as quickly as it appears. Now, today, Sleepy Hollow has fully embraced its paranormal reputation, transforming itself into a haunted destination for those eager to explore its ghostly history. Ghost tours, especially during the Halloween season, are immensely popular there, taking visitors to the most haunted locations in the town, including the old Dutch church, the graveyard where the horsemen is set to ride, and other spots that are rumored to be very haunted. And many of these tours include not only the telling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but also firsthand accounts from locals who claim to have experienced supernatural events in the area. Some ghost hunters also participate in these tours, and they come with their own equipment, like we do, hoping to document paranormal activity. But evidence of the horsemen, the actual horsemen, still remains elusive. There's no shortage of eerie encounters. Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, in addition to the ghost tours and annual Halloween festivities, Sleepy Hollow is home to numerous personal accounts. One such story comes from a lifelong resident who swears that late one night while driving along the road near the old Dutch church, she saw a figure on horseback riding in the distance. Okay, but here's my thing. Could have never mind. Let me finish this one thing. She describes how the figure seemed to move impossibly fast and disappearing into the fog without a trace. Okay, but number one, how fast? Like, you were driving. How fast were you going?
Yes.
Does somebody have horses up there that live near you?
Right.
I mean,
right. And if it is a haunting, it's probably residual energy from something that happened a long time ago, passing you by in the night.
Well, she's got the comment, were there aliens on horses? Anyways, we can't say for sure whether she saw the Headless Horseman, but she said that the experience left her very deeply unsettled. So
it was her experience.
Yeah, it was her experience. And we're going to believe her because, that's how she perceived it. That's what she experienced.
Right.
Another account comes from a ghost hunter who visited Sleepy Hollow with his team. He's armed with cameras, EMF detectors, and EVP recorders. Now, according to his report, the team captured unexplained voices on their equipment, and several members felt an overwhelming sense of dread near the old Dutch church. One investigator even claimed to see a shadowy figure on the edge of the graveyard, watching them silently before vanishing into the night. And many of these personal stories echo the same themes: shadowy figures, unexplained sounds, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Now, whether these experiences are the result of suggestibility or true paranormal encounters, they do add to the mystique of Sleepy Hollow, as well as the Headless Horseman, as a place for the past and present, the living and the dead, where this kind of just seems to converge. Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't doubt that they are experiencing some sort of paranormal activity. I don't doubt that in the slightest. Is it the Headless Horseman? No, it's not the Headless Horseman, because we know that it's folklore.
Yeah.
And it's a made up story.
Okay, but we keep talking so far about because I mean that's as far as research wise, that's about all the research I was able to find. But so we've been talking here lately about this collective projection, this collective mindset. Wow. We talk about tulpas and egregores and all that stuff all the time.
If it is, that's what it would be, because think of how many school children read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Think of how many people have seen the Disney movie. Think of all the interpretations that you've seen over time, ever since the story was written. If everybody is focusing that energy on that entity in that particular area of the country, it's a possibility. But I don't think. I think what most people are experiencing, like I said, is probably some sort of residual energy, or maybe it's a spirit of a rider on horseback. But the Headless Horseman, don't think so, personally.
Yeah. Well, as we bring this journey to a close, consider the strange haunting path we have followed. From the shadowy forest of medieval Europe to the mist-shrouded roads of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman is more than just a story. It's a legend born from centuries of fear of death, fear of the unknown, and the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. It's a legend that persists even today, whispering to us from the pages of history and folklore, and from the very streets and forests of the real Sleepy Hollow. We've seen how cultures across the world tell similar stories. The Dullahan of Ireland, that malevolent spirit who rides without a head seeking souls to claim, the wild huntsman or Germanic legend, a ghostly figure who prowls the forest pursuing lost souls under a moonless sky. These stories have endured through generations, passed down from frightened villagers and travelers who claim to have encountered something beyond explanation. But they are not confined to the distant past. They live on in the modern imagination and in the very real town of Sleepy Hollow, where the horseman still seems to cast a very long shadow. In the heart of New York's Hudson Valley, people continue to feel his presence. Even today, those visitors and residents alike speak of strange occurrences, those cold spots in the air, eerie figures glimpsed from the corner of the eye, and that unmistakable sound, the sound of hooves pounding against the earth in the dead of night. The old Dutch church, where so much of Washington Irving's story unfolds, remains a place of unease, a place where time feels fragile, as though something is waiting just beyond the edge of reality. Could it be the horseman riding through the veil between worlds, searching for his lost head? Perhaps. Perhaps it's all in our minds. Perhaps we, driven by the power of suggestion, see what we only expect to see. Maybe it's the mature trees swaying in the wind, casting twisted shadows that trick the eye. Or maybe it's the rhythmic beat of our own hearts that sound like hoofs on a forgotten road. But is that explanation enough? Can we really dismiss the eerie consistencies of these encounters across generations and across the globe? Or is there something darker lurking beyond the veil? Something that refuses to be forgotten? Think about the paranormal investigators who have walked the streets of Sleepy Hollow in search of proof. Their cameras have captured unexplained phenomena, glowing orbs, ghostly apparitions, voices calling out from the ether. Skeptics might dismiss these findings, but there's something undeniable about the way this legend lingers, as if the Headless Horseman is more than just a figment of the imagination. He's a presence, a relentless force that persists in the minds of those who encounter him, and those who rarely forget. So we must ask ourselves, why does the horseman continue to haunt us? Perhaps it's because on some level, we fear what he represents. The Headless Horseman is a symbol of unfinished business, of lives cut short before their time, and vengeance that knows no rest. He is the embodiment of our deepest fears, the fear that death is not the end, but rather a passage into something far more terrifying, where peace is never found. Could it be that the horseman's relentless spirit mirrors our own uncertainties about the afterlife? Think of all the ghost stories you've ever heard. Aren't they all in some way about lingering spirits? Those that cannot move on, those tethered to the earthly realm by unresolved trauma or vengeance? The horseman fits this mold perfectly. He is a specter searching for something he will never reclaim, his own head. And in his search, he strikes fear into the hearts of all who dare cross his path. And yet, for all the stories, all the sightings, the horseman remains elusive. He is both everywhere and nowhere, seen but never fully grasped, felt but never fully understood. Sleepy Hollow may celebrate its haunted legacy with ghost tours, reenactments, and festivals, but beneath the surface, there remains an unsettling truth. Some legends never die because they were never just legends to begin with. So as you reflect on the stories we've explored tonight, ask yourself, is it possible that the horseman still rides, waiting for his moment to strike? Could he be more than a myth, more than a character from a forgotten past? It's easy to dismiss such notions in the daylight when the sun is shining and the world is bustling around you. But when night falls and the trees grow quiet, when the wind howls through the trees, streets grow quiet and the wind howls through the trees and shadows begin to dance along the roads, can you be so sure? Perhaps the next time you find yourself alone on a dark, foggy road, you'll listen a little closer. Maybe you'll hear the distant echoes of hoofs growing louder and getting closer. You'll feel that chill in the air, the weight of an unseen presence looming behind you. But whatever you do in that moment, remember this. Don't look back. Because if the Headless Horseman is real, and if he is chasing you, no one has ever lived to tell what happens if you look him in the eye. So, sleep well tonight if you can, but be warned. The next time you hear the sound of galloping hoofs in the distance, you might just find yourself face to face with the legend. And this time, it may not be a story after all.
You better get your ass to the North Bridge before it falls out.
Lord. So what do y'all think? I mean, now we can open back up to like Agribirds and
these
stuff.
damn comments off.
I don't know, man. Well, I mean, like I said, I think that if people are seeing a Headless Horseman, it would have to be a thought form entity. And if there's that much energy in that valley, and there's that many people focusing their intent on something, perhaps something did get created out of the ether. But I don't think that's as likely as there just being some residual energy and some, maybe some wayward spirit still galloping around that isn't the Headless Horseman just hanging out in the valley.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I have to address something in the comments that I got called out for that I knew I was going to get called out for. But you have to remember, sometimes he carries a jack-o'-lantern. It said, hold up, how are you going to look him in the eye if he has no head? Yes, I understand. Okay, you don't have to call me out so hard. He's just pretending.
I asked him that last night, y'all.
She did. What am I going to say?
Well, how do you know he's carrying a head?
You can't come face to face with him either.
Right.
He ain't got one.
Yeah.
If it's under his arm, it is. It's like, oh.
It is a figure of speech.
Yeah, and I do find that interesting that the jack-o'-lantern became so synonymous with the Headless Horseman after the fact. And I wonder if you were talking about how in Irving's version, he's carrying his head underneath his arm. And I wonder if that was something to kind of make it more palpable for children. Yeah. Or if that was a blending of Irish folklore with the Headless Horseman as well, because we know that's where the jack-o'-lantern comes from.
Well, and it also kind of is. So the Dullahan does carry his head under his arm. And one thing that I realized that did not make the final notes, I did read something where he can actually hurl his head.
And that's what the horseman does, yes.
At you. I know. I bet Shelley's had a lot of head hurled at her.
I've never had head tossed at me before, but I'll play. Why not? Oh my!
I know. See, I knew we were going to have trouble getting
the comments tonight. I should not have the comments tonight.
I know. I've read them. It just says head incoming.
Y'all know what? Y'all know once I get tickled, I'm done.
I mean, like the figures that the Headless Horseman come from, to me, are a lot more frightening than the actual Headless Horseman himself. You have the Dullahan that carries his head under his arm and it has fucking human spine as a whip.
It's so cool.
Don't kink shame him.
I'm not kink shaming. Do your own thing, boo boo. That's fine. I like to play with the dirty as well, but it terrify the shit out of me if I'm like laying in bed and some dude walks in like, and it's got a fucking spine for a whip. I'd be like, it puts the lotion on his skin. I'm the fuck out of here. Like, No, I would have to going back to, on a serious note. I'll go back and agree with you, Ryan. I think if anything that the Headless Horseman is, he has to be thought form at this point.
Right.
All of that energy pinpointed to that area. He has to be. If it's anything that anybody is seeing, he's got to be a thought form entity by this point.
He's like OG Slender Man at this point.
Right. He's like the Slender Man of the early 1800s. Or late 1700s, whatever it is.
Yeah. So yeah, if people are encountering it, that's what they've got to be encountering, unless it's some other spirit out riding around, or a replay of the past, or maybe a time slip. I don't know, but you're not. I don't think. I was going to say it very well could be, because with this diary entry that has been alleged to have been found of a headless Hessian, getting his head taken off. I mean, it could be a replay of an event. I don't know. I don't know if something like that profound would be residual. I don't know. Maybe that. Maybe because that is a lot of energy being expelled into the environment. Right. Yeah. So if it's somehow being replayed on a loop, because that was.
I think if you guys are saying that it could be like a thought form, like a mass indoctrination of an idea into someone's, into a community's brain. If you're saying you can make it a thought forms can take on their own, ideas, movements and stuff. So why can it not be something that's legitimately there? If you truly believe that if it was created based on a mass, basically understanding of a story and a belief in that story, why can't it be real? I'd like to think of some old boy hopping around on a horse, flinging his head at people.
But I mean, what I'm saying is I don't think that any like late night rider is. I mean, it could just be that someone who is a spirit that's a late night rider on a horse. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Headless Horseman that people are encountering. If that is the thought form that's been projected, why wouldn't it be? Well, I'm saying it could be. One of the things they encountered could be that, I assume, but maybe not all. Like, the Headless Horseman is a rider, but not all riders are the Headless Horseman. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. I get what you're saying. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on, is that if it's anything at this point, Shelley, I'm going to agree with you as well. I think if it's anything at this point, it's thought form, and it is real, because I have a belief that if there is enough thought put into something, that thought form can take on, I guess, a sentience of its own, so it can become this powerful being that gallops through the night with no head, I mean, that's what people are seeing. So because so many people have come across these thought form entities that were created to serve a purpose, and then they do gain their own autonomy, and they just start doing whatever they want at some point. They get, like I said, they gain sentience. I don't know, man. I think the only way to know is we should go and find out. I was about to say, we should go investigate. We should go to Sleepy Hollow and go walk the streets late at night by the old Dutch church and see if we can't see a horse galloping without a headless rider. I'd be like, wait, come back. I just need to go to Sonic.
I'd be like, hi, sugar, can I get a ride? I'm tired of walking.
So now it's telling me, I'll never like, you got fireball?
I'd be like, can I see your whip? I'll be right back. I'm going to go ride your horsey real quick. You wait here. Hang out with the guys. And that sounded dirty, and that is not where I was going with that, but take it for what you will. I meant to say that I was going to take over his power, but it's all right.
Yeah. On that note, do you all have any final notes or final thoughts over the
Brian, you are missing these comments. Oh my Lord.
Any final thoughts on the Headless Horseman, y'all? Kind of agreed on this thought form, if anything.
I mean, Sleepy Hollow has the Headless Horseman, and we have the Horseless Hellion over here, so.
I have a horse. You shut up.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Nuh-uh.
Yes, we do. We have 3 horses.
I did not know that.
Just because you didn't know it, don't make it not so. I'm a Texas girl. I got a horse.
Oh, she tells me more than she tells you.
I'm just kidding. I know. But no,
we got some cows too.
I knew you had cows. I didn't know you had a horse.
Yeah, got 3 of them. I don't like to ride them.
Well, I stand corrected.
Yes, you do. I don't like to ride them. I have to go outside to do that. My dad won't let me trot them around in the house.
You know, you don't like anything outside.
I don't like outside. No.
But no, I mean,
go ahead.
No, I mean that's pretty much all I think about it. It's a very good story. It's a very great, interesting story, especially for this time of year. I love to crack it open and read it. And probably after we get done, I'm probably going to throw the Disney version on because man, Bing Crosby can spin a yarn in that one. So
yeah.
And I think that the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Actually, I think that what people are seeing is probably what has been thought up by the Mass Collective. Yeah. I think it's totally real. I think they see what they say they're seeing. I too used to be terrified by the Disney version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And you all know Goofy L. Ichabod Crane, he was never getting the girl. He might as well just gone with the horseman. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that.
And I'm going to go with that. I agree with both of y'all as well. I think it is a total thought form if people are experiencing or what they're experiencing. Who are we to doubt people's experiences? I wanted to throw in the scientific skepticism point of it because we've never really gone down that route with some of these things that we do talk about and kind of look at the other side of it. We just take kind of the lens of it from the paranormal investigator side, which is what we do. We do that scientific skepticism when we're debunking evidence. But that was kind of fun to be like, is it just a figment of the imagination? How can it be just a figment of the imagination? And I'm going to have to lend that it's not. I think these people are experiencing what they are experiencing. And I think that it's just a collective projection now at this point, and that it can be very much real on what these people are experiencing out there. So that is my final thoughts on that.
Well, and with that, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Absolutely. Well, After Dark with EVP seasons 1 and 2, they are streaming now on Paraflix Paranormal Plus. Season 3 is dropping in like a freaking week, October 24th, 2024. So do not miss more evidence, never before seen footage, and more exclusive interviews that you're not going to get anywhere else other than over on Paraflix. You can watch Paraflix on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. You are going to want to use the link that we are going to post tomorrow morning to our Facebook on Wednesday morning, or it is in the show notes for you audio listeners. Use that link and enter the code AFTERDARK25 for 25% off your annual subscription. I think it drops to like $37.50 or something like that. So within that link, you are also going to find every social media channel that we are on, our public investigation page, which we do have some tickets still left available for the Gregg County Historical Museum investigation in Longview, Texas this weekend. So if you have not gotten your tickets, go and get them. I think we only have a very small handful left. Do not forget, we are doing the walking tour of downtown Longview, the haunted walking tour as well. There are 3 tours, 6, 7, and 8. This investigation at Gregg County is not going to start until 9 p.m. We are going till 3 a.m. instead of our usual 7 to 2. So come join us on the walking tour and learn all about haunted downtown Longview. It's going to be a blast. You are also going to be able to find our Patreon page. Our Patreon is the fastest and easiest way to directly help to support the show. It is just $5 a month. That price is never going to increase. And with that, you're going to instantly unlock over 400 exclusive Patreon exclusive videos where you can't see anywhere else. That includes the pre and post broadcast, which is the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast. Child, you don't want to miss the pre-broadcast we had tonight. The adventures of EVP on dating apps.
I'm not on them.
At that. Shelly is. She's on Farmers Only.
No, I'm not. I'm sure they're all very nice people, but I don't do outside.
But you are also going to see other never before seen paranormal footage, our raw investigation footage, and we have other things like full-blown Estes methods. If you ever want to see the dirtiest Estes method we've ever had, that is on our Patreon page. Those investigation footage are from places like Squirrel Cage Jail, Hell House Manor, Yorktown, and you're going to see others on there as well. I do have some spirit dice sessions that I will be putting up there so you can see how the spirit dice work as well. So don't forget, we offer that 7-day free trial so you can check it all out before you commit. So make sure you go and check out our Patreon. And I would say if you want to meet us in person, but basically the only thing you can do is come to the Gregg County investigation if you want to meet us in person, because we are no more Paracons this year. We did our last one in Rock Island at the beginning of this month, which was an absolute blast.
So we've already got like 5.
We've got about 5 or
Is
6
it-
on the
is
calendar
it
for
already?
next year.
Is it
Yeah.
5 or 6? Oh,
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll be
I'm
all
excited.
over. We'll be all over the country. Again.
all
So
over
if
the United States next year.
you did not see us this year, you will get a chance to see us next year. We will
Yes,
be
you will.
somewhere close by you. But make sure you go follow us on all those social media accounts. Just search Everything Vaguely Paranormal and look for that green sound wave. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, now X, TikTok, all of that kind of stuff. We're on every one of them. And for you audio listeners, remember you can catch us live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. And we want to thank you all for all of your support. I don't think we say that enough. Every like, every comment, every share, every audio download, everything that y'all do helps to keep the spooky going. And so we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts because y'all allow us to do what we get to do and bring the funny and the stories to y'all each and every week. So remember, if you have any stories or questions for us, you can send those to the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube page.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, thank y'all so much for joining us for another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Blake Smith. My partner's in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. Y'all have a wonderful night. We love y'all. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.